Forgive the lack of face cam in this video, but I have a lot to cover and it's a lot faster to edit down audio than it is to edit both video and audio, what with rendering and such. Now, I had a lot of trouble figuring out what to do in this video, how to present it exactly. I could have done another one of those cinematic detective timeline run-throughs the same way that I did with Asia Argento. I could have done a Twitter read-through of nuclear hot takes. I could have even done a hashtag everything is sexist video on listening and believing, but unlike in those Title IX cases that I usually cover, in this case I actually have a lot of evidence and stories from parties to work with. The accused and the accuser, and to be quite frank, none of any of that would have been nearly substantial enough for what it is that this is, which is a lot more important than being entertaining and appealing to aesthetics, at least to me. So then I saw the Senate hearings where Ford and Kavanaugh gave their testimonies and the questioning that followed, and I knew what this video had to be. This will be a catalog of everything that is wrong with the Kavanaugh situation and what could have been done better from all angles about all things. Essentially, no holds barred, to use a wrestling term. Which means I'm probably not going to be making very many friends with this video because no one in this situation will be spared from my criticisms. We'll be diving into details, the hearing itself, how everything was handled, and we'll be splitting the responsible parties up as follows: Ford, Kavanaugh, politicians, and the media. Any and all other parties specified in my initial opening, but that are mentioned within the video from here on out, either fit into these categorical parties or are an apparatus used by these categorical parties in some way. Broad, yes, but necessary, unfortunately. Of course, I'm not going to hit on every single issue that there is, because there are quite a few. Sometimes there are repeat issues and offenders. Sometimes there are things that could be simplified. And sometimes I just might not think it's a problem myself, to be quite frank. But you're welcome to tell me otherwise in the comments down below if I missed something you think should be in there. I'll say this before I continue on. In this video, I did try to be as objective as possible, but I'll state my biases here so that you're aware of where I'm coming from. I am not politically affiliated with anything. Not the Republicans, not the Democrats, etc., etc. Before the allegations came out, I had no opinion of Kavanaugh either way. And then after the allegations came out, I was in fact skeptical of Ford because I don't simply listen and believe. I will not be posing any conspiracy theories. I will not offer alternate explanations for anything here. I am here to simply poke holes and to criticize. That's my purpose in this. That's all this video is. So without further ado, let's get into the offenders.
No.
You have been warned. Let the demonetization process begin! First up, Dr. Ford. Believe it or not, alleged victims of sexual assault can have committed wrongdoing. Everyone can. No one is perfect. No one. I don't care what it is that's happened to them in their lifetime, whatever trauma may have taken place. That is the simple fact of the matter, that no one is perfect, and that anyone can do wrong. Or maybe I'm just one of those assholes who can find fault in anybody. Admittedly, I am a bit of an asshole, but that doesn't detract from the fact that Dr. Ford had 30 plus years to come forward with information about a guy who, if you believe the other victims, is allegedly a serial Bill Cosby knockoff in his primitive years and a judge on the second highest court in all of America in his formative years, up until now.
Over the years, I told very, very few friends that I had this traumatic experience. I told my husband before we were married that I had experienced a sexual assault. I had never told the details to anyone, the specific details, until May 2012 during a couples counseling session. The reason this came up in counseling...
I'm not about to blow smoke up the ass of Clinton conspiracists. I won't go so far as to call this anything close to Democratic gay ops, though it is highly suspicious. However, that lack of forthcomingness on the part of Dr. Ford is nothing if not deplorable. And that's not just me looking at how long it took for her to come forward. That's me looking at what she said in her sworn testimony.
The press reported that Mr. Kavanaugh's confirmation was virtually certain. Persons painted him as a champion of women's rights and empowerment. and I believed that if I came forward, my single voice would be drowned out by a chorus of powerful supporters. By the time of the confirmation hearings, I had resigned myself to remaining quiet and letting the committee and the Senate make their decision without knowing what Mr. Kavanaugh had done to me. Once the press started reporting on the existence of the letter I had sent to Senator Feinstein, I faced mounting pressure. Reporters appeared at my home and at my workplace, demanding information about the letter in the presence of my graduate students. They called my bosses and coworkers and left me many messages, making it clear that my name would inevitably be released to the media.
She only came forward because she had no other choice. Someone leaked the story, and we'll get to that, but I'm sorry to say, that doesn't make her brave. Everything after the fact of her deciding not to come forward is not her being brave. It's her trying to get out in front of a story.
Well, my original intent, I just want to remind, was to communicate with everyone when there was still a list of candidates who all seemed to be, just from my perspective, from what I could read, equally qualified. And I was in a hurry to try to get the information forward, but didn't quite know how to do that.
How long does it actually take to figure out how to contact your congressman and tell them your story that you've let marinate for 35 plus years? You testified that in your therapy in 2012.
In explaining why I wanted a second front door, I began to describe the assault in detail. I recall saying that the boy who assaulted me could someday be on the U.S. Supreme Court, and spoke a bit about his background at an elitist all-boys school in Bethesda, Maryland.
Why wait until that was basically the inevitable outcome to come forward, honestly?
To relay the information to the Senate and the President. Did you contact either the Senate or the President on or before July 6th?
No, I did not. I did not know how to do that.
Okay. Prior to July 6th, had you spoken to any member of Congress, and when I say Congress, I mean the Senate or the House of Representatives, or any congressional staff members about your allegations?
No.
Why did you contact the Washington Post then on July 6th?
So I was panicking because I knew the timeline was short for the decision, and people were giving me advice on the beach, people who don't know about the processes, but they were giving me advice. And many people told me, you need to hire a lawyer. And I didn't do that. I didn't understand why I would need a lawyer. Somebody said, call the New York Times, call the Washington Post, put in an anonymous tip, go to your congressperson. And when I weighed those options, I felt like the best option was to try to do the civic route, which is to go to my congressperson, who happens to be Anna Eshoo. So I called her office, and I also put in the anonymous tip to the Washington Post, and unfortunately, neither got back to me before the selection of the nominee.
Since I just brought up the therapy, let's talk about the notes that no one can see unless they play by the rules of the accuser. What? No, I'm sorry, that's not how this works. You have to give them new information in order for the FBI to come up with questions based off of that new information. These are things that theoretically could corroborate her story, however, they have yet to be made public. So we can't actually look at the therapy notes to corroborate any of the story. Sure, you can interview the husband, but I hold the other Ford's testimonies just as credible as, say, judges' denials, that anything akin to sexual assault happened at all, of course. Both are witnesses that are entirely way too close to this to be useful on their own. The therapist could make a statement, but that's some massively gray area considering that doing so would be violating Ford's patient-therapist confidentiality, and it could land her in hot water later on. So we're left with the notes themselves, the ones we cannot see. But even then, there's a little insight to be gained from the line of questioning by Miss Mitchell.
Would it be fair to say that Brett Kavanaugh's name is not listed in those notes?
His name is not listed in those notes.
The therapy records themselves reportedly do not list Brett Kavanaugh's name within them, which leads us back to what is essentially the statements of an anonymous therapist under gag order, an accuser, and the husband not really corroborating evidence at all, I'm afraid. Right from the get-go, Ford states that her memory about the events surrounding the event are not the most details, and she says as much.
I do not remember all of the details of how that gathering came together, but like many that summer, it was almost surely a spur-of-the-moment gathering. I truly wish I could be more helpful with more detailed answers to all of the questions that have and will be asked about how I got to the party and where it took place and so forth. I don't have all the answers, and I don't remember as much as I would like to.
Which is understandable, I get it, that she can't remember the date. Memory decay is a thing that happens as you get older. Your memory of events gets foggier and your ability to recall becomes less than ideal. It's part of the reason why eyewitness testimony in a court of law, even within the time period of an investigation and a subsequent trial, is sketchy at best. I'll link an article to the American Psychological Association on memory in the description, along with all of the other links that I'll be citing as evidence in this, so feel free to read up on that. We have so very little time, so I'll just continue on. That being said, we are going to talk about what Ford doesn't remember, because I feel it's an important part of the whole poking procedure. We'll be going in order of oldest to most recent. I understand if she can't remember how she got to the party, but I think that someone somewhere would have remembered how she got home that night.
Looking at the third thing here, we calculated the distance from the closest point to your house from a mile radius of the country club, and then the farthest point. You can see it's 6.2 and of course 8.2 miles. And you've described this as being near the country club, wherever this house was. Is that right?
I would describe it as somewhere between my house and the country club in that vicinity that's shown in your picture.
Okay.
And the country club is about a 20-minute drive from my parents' home.
She would have been traumatized. She would have been traumatized and probably wouldn't have remembered it, but someone else would have noticed, likely, that she was in a state of just shock. So where is that person? Or even her parents after she got home. In fact, where are they now? They haven't said a goddamn thing. Anyway, back to the point. Whoever drove her home would be able to provide deeper insight into the date as well as the state of Ford immediately after the fact, if they remember. But they haven't come forward. And then there's the lack of memory with regards to the polygraph test on August 7th. She can't really recall what day it was.
So he administered a polygraph on the day that you attended your grandmother's funeral?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Or it might have been the next day. I spent the night in the hotel, so.
If it were her grandmother's funeral or not, although I don't know why you would do a polygraph the day of a funeral. That seems strange to me. And then if she was filmed or audio recorded. During the process, she says she kind of checked out.
Were you audio and video recorded when you were taking that test?
Okay, so I remember being hooked up to a machine, like being placed onto my body and being asked a lot of questions and crying a lot. That's my primary memory of that test. I don't know. I know he took laborious detail into explaining what he was going to be doing, but I was just focused on kind of what I was going to say and my fear about that. I wasn't listening to every detail about whether it was audio or video recorded.
She says she can't remember if she shared the therapy notes with the WashPo reporter.
Did you show a full or partial set of those marriage therapy records to the Washington Post?
I don't remember. I remember summarizing for her what they said. So I'm not quite sure if I actually gave her the record.
Okay. So it's possible that the reporter did not see these notes.
I don't know if I can't recall whether she saw them directly or if I just told her what they said.
However, the WashPo reported that she had showed them the note and that they had reviewed the notes from the therapist. Ford said she told no one of the incident in any detail until 2012 when she was in couples therapy with her husband. The therapist's notes, portions of which were provided by Ford and reviewed by the Washington Post, do not mention Kavanaugh's name, but say she reported that she was attacked by students from an elitist boys' school, who went on to become highly respected and high-ranking members of society in Washington. The notes say 4 boys were involved, a discrepancy Ford says was an error on the therapist's part. Ford said there were 4 boys at the party, but only 2 in the room.
Number 16th article that you did show them therapist notes. Is that incorrect?
I don't remember physically showing her a note.
Okay.
Perhaps my counsel did. I don't remember physically showing her my copy of the note.
Okay.
But I just don't remember. So I'm sorry. I have retrieved a physical copy of those medical records.
Then there's the incongruencies between Ford's accounts of the effect the events had on her.
Well, I think that the sequelae of sexual assault varies by person. So for me personally, anxiety, phobia, and PTSD-like symptoms are the types of things that I've been coping with. So more specifically, claustrophobia, panic, and that type of thing.
Is that the reason for the second door, front door?
Correct.
Is claustrophobia?
Correct.
And the account of her ex forwarded to the Senate. While visiting Ford in Hawaii, we traveled around the Hawaiian Islands, including one time on a propeller plane. Dr. Ford never indicated a fear of flying. To the best of my recollection, Dr. Ford never expressed a fear of close quarters, tight spaces or places with only one exit. I assisted Dr. Ford with finding a place to live in redacted California. She ended up living in a very small 500 square foot house with one door.
It's been reported by the press that you would not submit to an interview with the committee because of your fear of flying. Is that true?
Well, I was hoping that they would come to me, but then realized that was an unrealistic request.
It would have been a quicker trip for me.
Yes. So that was certainly what I was hoping, was to avoid having to get on an airplane.
Now let's talk about the last bit that she mentioned. In her testimony given to the Senate Judiciary Committee on September 27th, Ford agreed it would have been better if she could have testified at home without having to do this publicly in D.C. The thing is, she could have done exactly that, given that it was public knowledge, if you could consider CNN public knowledge.
I want to correct the record, but it's not something that I'm saying that you stated wrongly, because you may not know the fact that when you said that you didn't think it was possible for us to go to California as a committee or our investigators to go to California to talk to you, we did in fact offer that to you, and we had the capability of doing it, and we would have done it anywhere or anytime.
Then there's the witness testimony that doesn't back up her accounts by not recalling the alleged incident.
My staff reached out to other individuals allegedly at the party: Mark Judge, Patrick Smith, Leland Kaiser. All 3 submitted statements to the Senate under penalty of felony, denying any knowledge of the events described by Dr. Ford. Dr. Ford's lifelong friend, Ms. Kaiser, stated she doesn't know Judge Kavanaugh and doesn't recall ever attending a party with him.
That's all that I'm really going to say on that, because it's been done to death by everyone and their mother, especially during this hearing. And then there's the line of questioning about polygraphs in general.
Have you ever had discussions with anyone besides your attorneys on how to take a polygraph?
Never.
Straightforward answer, but it's been directly refuted by the same ex we talked about earlier. Dr. Ford lived with Monica McLean, who I understood to be her lifelong best friend. During that time, it was my understanding that McLean was interviewing for jobs with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. I witnessed Dr. Ford help McLean prepare for a potential polygraph exam. Dr. Ford explained in detail what to expect, how polygraphs worked, and helped McLean become familiar and less nervous about the exam. Dr. Ford was able to help because of her background in psychology. And then there's the unwillingness or miscommunication with regards to engaging the committee investigative staff in follow-up interviews.
September the 17th, Dr. Ford's counsel went on several television shows requesting that her client have an opportunity to tell her story. The same day, I scheduled a hearing for Monday, September the 24th, giving Dr. Ford a week to prepare her testimony and come to Washington, D.C. On September the 17th, committee investigative staff reached out to Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh to schedule follow-up interviews with Republican and Democrat investigators. Judge Kavanaugh accepted the opportunity to speak to the investigators under criminal penalty. Dr. Ford declined.
And then,
was it communicated to you by your counsel or someone else that the committee had asked to interview you and that they offered to come out to California to do so?
We're going to object, Mr. Chairman, to any call for privileged conversations between counsel and Dr. Ford. It's a privileged conversation.
Could you validate the fact that the offer was made without her saying a word?
Is it possible for that question to be answered without violating any consul relationships?
Can I say something to you? Do you mind if I say something to you directly?
Yeah.
I just appreciate that you did offer that. I wasn't clear on what the offer was. If you were going to come out to see me, I would have happily hosted you and had been happy to speak with you out there. I just did not, it wasn't clear to me that that was the case.
now there's obviously a lot of stuff, but let's redirect here and observe what I found wrong on the other side of this, with Kavanaugh. Judge Kavanaugh. Now, like I said, no one has been perfect in this. I have qualms with everybody involved and in their approach to this issue. And I'm taking this opportunity to address all of it. I didn't actually have an opinion on Kavanaugh until I witnessed this hearing. And so that was my very first exposure to the man, which I will admit doesn't actually do his impression on me any favors. But that was a conscious decision that I made going into this. I didn't want my impression of Kavanaugh to have any more context than what I had of Ford. That is, I wanted my first impression of both of these figures to be on a stage where they're both being interrogated about their past by the same people about the same issue. The impression I got of Ford wasn't charitable either, as I went into earlier in this video, but in a completely different way. I recognize that Kavanaugh is in a bit of a tight spot, that he's being put through the ringer, whether he deserves it or not. But I am of the belief that the true measure of a man is the one that you see when he's under immense pressure. Who we are under pressure says a lot about us as people overall. With regards to Kavanaugh, who he is under pressure, well, we'll get into that. Kavanaugh's portion of this 8.5-hour shit show starts out with his endlessly long opening statement, where he covers everything. And I mean everything. Things we care about, things we absolutely do not care about. This is a strategy on his part that could actually be considered a waste of time, in my opinion, as the things he addresses in his opening statements are matters that the committee questions him on later. Typically, less is more, especially when you're testifying to your culpability in a crime. Any lawyer, even the shitty ones, will tell you not to say anything unless asked a direct question on the stand, and even then, never offer more information than is necessary, because it will be put through scrutiny. But this is a job interview, so we've been reminded time and time again. Okay, sure, that's why every major media outlet in the nation has decided to take a magnifying glass to the teenage years of a country club boy. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We're talking about Kavanaugh, so one could call this damage control for his character. But given how divisively vocal the American people have been about this issue, we can infer that people who believed him before the hearing believe him now, and people who didn't believe him before the hearing don't. Regardless of how many women he talks about shoving through the glass ceiling. The only people you could have any hope of convincing with this are chronic fence-sitters who think with their gut interpretation of how they perceive people. So yes, this is a gigantic waste of time. Full stop. Then there's the misspeak within Kavanaugh's prepared opening statement.
All 4 people allegedly at the event, including Dr. Ford's longtime friend, Ms. Kaiser, have said they recall no such event.
I can't emphasize enough how much of this irked me, especially since it's such an easy thing to verify. It took me all of 5 minutes to Google this. That of the 4 other people alleged to have been there, not including Kavanaugh and Ford themselves, only 3 have been named and have subsequently procured witness statements. Unless we're talking about Chris Garrett, which we're not. He wasn't even named as one of the people in attendance at the party by Ford, so we're not talking about Chris Garrett. We're moving on from that opening statement for now. I'll play clips from this later, but as of right now, I'm done addressing it on its own. A great deal of Kavanaugh's testimony and the answers to questions from the committee consisted of repetition. Lots of repetition of issues. There's his abundant denial of wrongdoing.
I denied the allegation immediately, categorically, and unequivocally. I categorically and unequivocally deny the allegation against me by Dr. Ford. I never had any sexual or physical encounter of any kind with Dr. Ford. I never attended a gathering like the one Dr. Ford describes in her allegation. I've never sexually assaulted Dr. Ford or anyone.
The fact that he demanded a hearing immediately.
Senator, I'll do whatever the committee wants. I wanted a hearing the day after the allegation came up. I wanted to be here that day. I wanted a hearing the next day. Senator, I wanted the hearing last week. I've said I wanted a hearing, and I said I was welcome anything.
And beers. Oh, the beers.
Yes, we drank beer. My friends and I, the boys and girls. Yes, we drank beer. I liked beer. Still like beer. We drank beer. The drinking age, as I noted, was 18, so the seniors were legal. Senior year in high school, people were legal to drink. And we drank beer. And I said sometimes probably had too many beers, and sometimes other people had too many beers. We drank beer. We liked beer. I already answered the question. If you're,
Did it relate to alcohol?
I like beer.
You haven't answered that.
I like beer. I don't know if you do.
Okay.
Do you like beer, Senator, or not? What do you like to drink?
Next one is,
Senator, what do you like to
Judge,
drink?
have you...
None of this is bad on its own, but it just irked me because it made the process all the more long and I had to go through it twice. So, that's just a personal issue. It's not just the constant repetition. There was a level of animosity displayed here, and that definitely put me off.
Well, I agree with you there, and that's why I wish that the chairman had him here under oath. Now, you talked about your yearbook. In your yearbook, you talked about drinking and sexual exploits, did you not?
Senator, let me take a step back and explain high school. I was number 1 in the class. Freshman.
And I thought
no.
I thought only the Senate.
You got this up. I'm gonna talk about my high school. No. I'm gonna
let him answer.
I'm gonna talk about my high school record. If you're gonna sit here and mock me, some of you were lying in wait and had it ready. This first allegation was held in secret for weeks by a Democratic member of this committee and by staff. It would be needed only if you couldn't take me out on the merits. When it was needed, this allegation was unleashed and publicly deployed over Dr. Ford's wishes. This whole 2-week effort has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit, fueled with apparent pent-up anger about President Trump and the 2016 election, fear that has been unfairly stoked about my judicial record, revenge on behalf of the Clintons, and millions of dollars in money from outside left-wing opposition groups.
I get it. He's angry. He's been accused. And one of the people on the committee, with his future in their hands, is someone who he believes to be responsible for this hot mess. But there is no, I repeat, no, absolutely no reason that you should lose your cool and disrespect anybody, let alone the committee assigned to assess his ability to govern on national live TV. It doesn't bode well. It's not good optics, which is everything in politics. And if a judge seems fit to demonstrate disrespect in any such capacity, it sets an example that doesn't strike me as idyllic. If a judge can mouth off to his bosses, what logic is going to stop a criminal from mouthing off to a judge in turn, if they see that? Next, there's the constant evasiveness on Kavanaugh's part, which could also encompass the repetitive issue that I've already talked about.
And if you're very confident of your position, and you appear to be, why aren't you also asking the FBI to investigate these claims?
Senator, I'll do whatever the committee wants. I wanted a hearing the day after the allegation came up. I wanted to be here that day. Instead, 10 days passed where all this nonsense is coming out, that I'm in gangs, I'm on boats in Rhode Island, I'm in Colorado, I'm cited all over the place. And these things are printed and run breathlessly by cable news. I wanted a hearing the next day. My family's been destroyed by this, Senator. Destroyed.
And
whoever wants, whatever the committee decides, I'm all in
question is,
immediately. I'm all in immediately.
And it just seemed to me then when these allegations came forward that you would want the FBI to investigate those claims and clear it up once and for all.
Senator, the committee investigates. It's not for me to say how to do it, but just so you know, the FBI doesn't reach a conclusion. They would give you a couple 302s that just tell you what we said. So I'm here. I wanted to be here. I wanted to be here the next day. It's an outrage that I was not allowed to come and immediately defend my name and say, I didn't do this and give you all this evidence.
Mark Judge was a close friend of yours in high school. Now, Dr. Ford, as you know, has said that he was in the room when she was attacked. She also says you were, too. Unfortunately, the FBI has never interviewed him. We've not been able to have his attendance here. The chairman refuses to call him. If she's saying Mark Judge was in the room then he should be in the room here today. Would you want him called as a witness?
Senator, this allegation came into the committee.
Oh, no, but I'm just asking the question. Would you want him to be here as a witness?
He's already provided sworn testimony to the committee. This allegation's been hidden by the committee.
Does this reflect what you are? Does this yearbook reflect your focus on academics and your respect for women? That's easy, yes or no. You don't have to filibuster the answer. Does it reflect your focus on
I already
academics?
said the yearbook in my opening statement. The yearbook was obviously...
Just wait a minute. He's asked the question. I'll give you time to answer it.
The yearbook, as I said in my opening statement, was something where the students and editors made a decision to treat some of it as farce and some of it as exaggeration, some of it celebrating things that don't reflect the things that were really the central part of our school.
I would hope that all the members of the committee would join me in saying we're going to abide by your wishes and we will have that investigation.
I welcome whatever the committee wants to do because I'm telling the truth.
I want to know what you want to do.
I'm telling the truth.
I want to know what you want to do, Judge.
I'm innocent. I'm innocent of this charge.
Then you're prepared for an FBI investigation?
They don't reach conclusions. You reach the conclusion,
No,
Senator.
but they do investigate questions.
I'm innocent.
And you can't have it both ways, Judge. You can't say here at the beginning,
I wanted a
passion
hearing.
moment,
Look,
I
this
welcome
thing-
any kind of investigation.
This
and
thing was
then
sprung
walk
on
away
me.
from this.
This thing was sprung at the last minute after being held by staff.
Judge,
And I
if
called
there is no
for a
truth to-
hearing immediately.
If there is no truth to her charges, the FBI investigation will show that. The point I'm getting to is we at least can connect some dots here and get some information. Why would you resist that
Here's
kind
some
of
dots.
investigation? Why would you resist that kind of investigation?
Senator, I wanted the hearing last week.
I'm asking about the FBI investigation.
The committee figures out how to ask the questions. I'll do whatever. I've been on the phone multiple times with committee counsel. I'll talk to...
Judge Kavanaugh, will you support an FBI investigation right now?
I will do whatever the committee wants to...
Personally, do you think that's the best thing for us to do? You want to answer?
Look, Senator, I've said I wanted a hearing, and I said I was welcome anything. I'm innocent. This thing was held when it could have been presented in the...
which was about whether you've ever gotten aggressive while drinking or forgotten an evening after drinking.
Those are two different questions. I've already answered the second one. As the first, I think the answer to that is basically no. I don't know really what you mean by that. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, the reason
I don't mean it that way, but no is the basic answer, unless you're talking about something that I'm not aware of that you're going to ask about.
The reason I'm asking, we've had a very brief period of time to weigh outside evidence, and I'll join my colleagues in saying I wish we had more evidence in front of us today to weigh. Do you remember Liz Swisher, a college classmate of yours from Yale?
First, on your point about the outside evidence, all four witnesses.
Well, let me focus. I'm trying to get this question.
I know, but you made a point, and I just want to emphasize. All four witnesses who were allegedly at the event have said it didn't happen, including Dr. Ford's longtime friend, Ms. Kaiser.
The evasive reluctance to answer direct questions with direct answers means a lot, actually, because it comes off as a snake-like and slippery behavior. It's something that I would expect from a politician, of course, but just because one expects it doesn't mean that I'm cool with it. In fact, the reluctance to directly answer anything makes him look more guilty in general than anything Ford has said about him. Senator Hirenrow, near the end of the hearing, had a line of questioning that I think is an ideal summation of what has occurred that day, during Kavanaugh's hearing, during his testimony, and it's pretty telling.
And earlier you agreed that this process of advice and consent is really a job interview. Certainly not a criminal trial. There's certainly no entitlement for you to be confirmed to the Supreme Court. Are credibility, character, and candor of a nominee things for us to consider in your job interview?
I think my whole life is subject to consideration.
Is that yes? Credibility, character, and candor, are those specific traits that would be of interest to us as we consider putting you for life on the highest court in the country? Credibility, character, and candor.
Of course, and as part of my whole life.
Credibility, character, candor, and temperament. From what I've seen during this hearing, I can't say that Kavanaugh hits all of those requirements. Granted, this is only the first time that I've been exposed to him, and I haven't watched the other hours of hearings with him. But that is my impression. Next, we'll move on to the politicians, and I have a lot to say about them. A lot of this big, huge thunderfucking shit show could have been avoided, and is the direct result of ball dropping by politicians. Who else could screw up on such an embarrassingly national scale? That is all the introduction that this needs, to be quite frank, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of this. First off, Senator Feinstein.
Dr. Ford first raised her allegations in a secret letter to the ranking member nearly 2 months ago in July. This letter was secret from July 30th, September 13th July 30th until September 13th when I first heard about it. The ranking member took no action. The letter wasn't shared with me, our colleagues, or my staff. These allegations could have been investigated in a way that maintained the confidentiality that Dr. Ford requested. Before his hearing, Judge Kavanaugh met privately with 65 senators, including the ranking member. But the ranking member didn't ask Judge Kavanaugh about the allegations when she met with him privately in August. The Senate Judiciary Committee held its 4-day public hearing from September 4th to September 7th. Judge Kavanaugh testified for more than 32 hours in public. We held a closed session for members to ask sensitive questions on the last evening, which the ranking member did not attend. Judge Kavanaugh answered nearly 1,300 written questions submitted by senators after the hearing, more than all prior Supreme Court nominees. Throughout this period, we did not know about the ranking member's secret evidence. Then, only at an 11th hour, on the eve of Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation vote, did the ranking member refer the allegations to the FBI. And then, sadly, the allegations were leaked to the press. And that's where Dr. Ford was mistreated.
Holding the allegations for as long as she did and not doing or saying anything. That letter was dated July 30th, 2018, and was not referred to the FBI until September 12th, 2018, where it was then redacted and forwarded to the White House as the letter became part of the background investigation file on the incumbent Judge Kavanaugh. Senator Grassley, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, only became aware of it on September the 13th.
When I received Dr. Ford's letter on September the 13th, my staff and I recognized the seriousness of these allegations and immediately began our committee's investigation consistent with the way the committee has handled such allegations in the past.
This letter was held in confidentiality from the rest of the Senate, despite
is that Representative Eshu's office delivered a copy of my letter to Senator Feinstein's office on July 30th. The letter included my name, but also a request that it be kept confidential. My hope was that providing the information confidentially would be sufficient to allow the Senate to consider Mr. Kavanaugh's serious misconduct without having to make myself, my family, or anyone's family vulnerable to the personal attacks and invasions of privacy that we have faced since my name became public.
Which begs the question, why would you send a letter of this nature to a representative from the Senate Judiciary Committee and not want something done? Then there's this contradiction of logic, that statement that was followed up directly with this.
In a letter dated August 31st, Senator Feinstein wrote that she would not share the letter without my explicit consent.
Now I ask you, in what world does an expectation of the Senate considering Kavanaugh's serious misconduct translate to, I should keep this letter from the 20 other members of the Senate it would be equally relevant to? That was obviously not the way anything should have been handled, but how do we save face, do you think?
This inquiry truly credible is to do what we've always done when new information about a nominee comes to light. To use your words this morning, you want to reach the truth. The easy way to do that, ask the FBI to investigate. This is what we've always done. Let them investigate, report back to us. The same applies to the serious allegations made by Deborah Ramirez and Julie Swetnick. Let's have a nonpartisan, professional investigation, and then take the time to have these witnesses testify.
We demand an FBI investigation, of course. It was all of the Democratic members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, or most of them at least. That's how we get to the bottom of this. Of course. That seems so simple. I wonder, what would the FBI do in a process such as this? Well, I consulted Georgetown for that, and it happens to be a third step in the process. The Senate Judiciary Committee holds a hearing on the nominee. The committee usually takes a month to collect and receive all necessary records from the FBI and other sources about the nominee, and for the nominee to be prepared for the hearings. So records. That's what the FBI offers the committee. So then who does the questioning? That's right, the Senate committee. They do the questioning, and the fourth step of the process of confirming a judge is typically, during the hearings, witnesses both supporting and opposing the nomination present their views. Senators question the nominee on his or her qualifications, judgments, and philosophy. We'll come back to this. That brings me to the next thing. The date, September 17th, and the bipartisan parties have the opportunity to interview the involved parties after allegations surface. However, the Democrats declined to interview Kavanaugh.
In his interview on September the 17th, Judge Kavanaugh denied the allegations and requested a hearing as soon as possible. Democratic staff refused to participate in that interview. The next day, September the 18th, committee investigative staff contacted Mark Judge requesting an interview. Committee staff also learned the identity of two other alleged party-goers and requested interviews. Mark Judge submitted a statement under penalty of felony, denying knowledge of the party described by Dr. Ford, and states that he never saw Brent in the manner described by Dr. Ford. And I can go on and on about that.
Furthermore, the chairman of the committee notes that they were not present during the witness testimony initially.
Statements were taken by our majority staff?
Yes.
Did minority staff participate?
No.
Why not?
You'll have to ask them.
Well, were they instructed not to participate?
No,
They chose not to?
that's right.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
And
I'm told
if I
the
could, I
minority
still think
staff
I have
was
the
not
floor, Mr. Chairman.
notified.
Let's listen to Senator Feinstein.
Can we be excused?
I am
The witness is
told by
quite tired.
staff-
I would like,
She'd like
I'd
to be
like to,
excused.
if you'd wait just a minute, I'd like to.
Grassley's follow-up statement.
The statements of 3 witnesses, Dr. Ford said, were also at the party. These statements were provided to us under penalty of felony by lying to, if you lie to Congress. As soon as my team learned the names of these 3 potential witnesses, we immediately reached out to them requesting an interview. In response, all 3 submitted statements to us denying any knowledge of the gathering Dr. Ford described. If we had calls with them, we would have invited the minority to join. Every time that we've received any information regarding Judge Kavanaugh, we've sought to immediately follow through and investigate. The minority staff sat on Dr. Ford's letter for weeks, and staff told us that they believed it is, quote, highly inappropriate to have these follow-up calls before the FBI finishes its investigation, end quote, even though the FBI had completed its background information. When we followed up with Judge Kavanaugh after we received Dr. Ford's allegations, the ranking member staff didn't join us, even though these calls are usually done on a bipartisan basis. They joined other calls with the judge, but they didn't participate or ask any questions.
And then there's the fact that the following were of such important lines of questioning: his drinking, the Devil's Triangle.
Devil's Triangle.
Drinking game.
How's it played?
3 glasses in a triangle.
And
You ever played quarters?
no.
Okay, it's a quarters game.
Which, by the way, in a letter from Kavanaugh's ex-Georgetown prep classmate, not only defended Kavanaugh's description of the term before the Senate Judiciary Committee last week, which has become a sticking point for Democrats, pouring through the yearbook, but also explained how the game was played. Devil's Triangle was a drinking game we came up with in high school, said a letter signed by Delancey Davis, Bernard McCarthy Jr., Paul Murray, and Matthew Quinn. It was a variation on the game quarters. When we played Devil's Triangle, 4 people sat at a table. On the table, 3 small glasses of beer were arranged next to one another to form a triangle. Each of the 4 participants took turns being the shooter. The shooter attempted to bounce a quarter into one of the glasses. If the quarter landed in one of the glasses, the person at the table sitting nearest the glass had to drink the beer. Then there's the yearbook questioning.
Our friends.
Does this reflect what you are? Does this yearbook reflect your focus on academics and your respect for women?
Then there's the not remembering a game.
Orioles versus Red Sox. In both, you respond who won anyway or who won that game anyway. Should we draw any conclusion that a loss of recollection associated with alcohol was involved in you not knowing who won the games that you attended?
No. First of all, the Georgetown Louisville was watching it on TV, a party, and
That's not inconsistent with drinking and not remembering what happened.
I'm aware. And the point of both was we, in essence, were having a party and didn't pay attention to the game, even though the game was the excuse we had for getting together. I think that's very common. I don't know if you've been to a Super Bowl party, for example, Senator, and not paid attention to the game and just hung out with your friends. I don't know if you've done that or not, but that's what we were referring to.
Then there's the boofed.
Senator, or not? What do you like to drink?
Next one is,
Senator, what do you like to drink?
Judge, have you, I don't know if it's boofed or boofed. How do you pronounce that?
That refers to flatulence. We were 16.
Okay.
Really? Lastly, we have the questioning purely meant to be a catch-22.
I said all allegations should be taken seriously. You should listen to both sides. My family has no ill will toward her.
Thank you, sir. Do you wish that she never came forward?
Senator, I did not do this. The witness...
That's not my question, sir. Could you try to answer my question, sir? Do you wish she never came forward?
The witnesses who were there say it didn't happen.
Okay, sir. Do you wish she just remained silent then?
I wish the witnesses who were there say it didn't happen. All allegations should be taken seriously.
So even if it's in the final days before a vote, if someone has a credible allegation of experience, that they held for a long time, that person should be allowed to come forward. And in fact, as she said, it was her civic duty. You're not questioning her sense of civic duty, are you?
She did come forward, and then it was.
I know you have a lot of political animus. You stated it very clearly towards my colleagues and I on this panel. What I'm trying to get to the bottom of is you do not see her specifically as part of an orchestrated event. She is not a political pawn.
I don't know.
How is he supposed to answer this? Of course he'd rather she hadn't come forward. Guilty or not, his life is a hot mess right now. And it doesn't look like an end is near. I bet Ford wishes she hadn't come forward too. Let's be honest, alright? But if he says that, it looks like he's trying to silence a victim of sexual assault, or all victims of sexual assault is the perception. Discouraging victims, I guess. This is a scummy question, through and through, if you ask me. Not necessary at all. It's fucked up. But that's not all. We have the Republicans to get to as well. Remember when we talked about the Democrats with regards to the steps that are typically taken when confirming a judge? Well, let's consult Georgetown one more time. In the fourth step of the process of confirming a judge, it's typically during the hearings, witnesses both supporting and opposing the nomination present their views. Senators question the nominee on his or her qualifications, judgments, and philosophy. Well, this is interesting.
In 1991, the Senate heard from 22 witnesses over 3 days. Today, while rejecting an FBI investigation, Republicans are refusing to hear testimony from any other witness, including Mark Judge, who Dr. Ford identified as being in the room when the attack took place. And we believe Judge should be subpoenaed so the committee can hear from him directly.
Why are we not calling the witnesses to testify in front of the Senate?
It's also my understanding that Mr. Judge is not willing to come forward to answer our questions. As a result, we cannot test his memory or make any assessment of his thoughtfulness or character. And I think that's why the failure to call him to testify is so very critical. And I hope the majority would reconsider that.
Okay. Senator Blumenthal.
Mr. Chairman, I ask if you have sworn statements that you're submitting for the record, that we have those individuals come before us so that we can ask them questions about those statements. I think that the nature of this proceeding would be compromised if we lack an opportunity to ask them questions about sworn statements that will be part of the record. So, frankly, Mr. Chairman, I would object to entering them in the record.
Why are we not calling the polygraph technician to testify?
Mr. Chairman, we had proposed having the polygraph examiner testify, as you know. If that had happened, the full panoply of materials that he had supporting his examination would have been provided. You rejected that request, so what we did provide was the polygraph report, which is what the members of the committee currently have.
Grassley, come now. This isn't the proper procedure, and you know that. Now, it should be noted that the Republicans used a proxy prosecutor who specialized in special victims, such as those of sexual assault, etc., named Miss Mitchell. During Ford's testimony, all the Republican senators ceded their time to her for questioning. Brilliant optics, I will say. But I also must ask, why not cede all your time to Miss Mitchell while questioning Kavanaugh, for consistency's sake? Well, that will be answered when I address both parties. Which brings me to the next point. Both parties. This was such a prominent thing. Nearly all senators took so much time to make statements of personal preference, reflection, opinions, aggrandizing themselves. They were all so irrelevant to the issue at hand, etc. Senators, we get it. You want to look good to your constituents, but as someone who went through all 8 hours of the hearing twice, I'm a bit salty with a lot of you at the lack of concision. I don't care if we get one salty Lindsey Graham historical moment making. It wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth the 16 hours of my life that I'll never get back. And then there's the media. We cannot talk about politics and the day-to-day life and grind of life in the US of A without bringing up the media and how absolutely sleazy and irresponsible they are. I mean, my goodness. Imagine. They believed Ford to be a victim of sexual assault. So, logically, the next step is to stalk outside Ford's house and approach her at work. Obviously. Yes, that's exactly what you do with a victim that you believe is a victim of sexual assault. Shame on you. Shame on you, reporters. Then let's talk about the way this was publicized. Every little thing builds upon itself. You publish a story implicating someone in a crime without any real proof. What happens next, do you think? Well, the preponderance of false and ridiculous allegations, for one. Schwetnick is an example, and the anonymous accusation as another. Not only are you muddying the waters, but you're also making yourself out to be the fools, damaging your credibility and annihilating a person's reputation even further and baselessly. And then there are the anonymous martyrs, the two alleged men who believe themselves to be true perpetrators Ford is referring to. Then let's not forget the fake news surrounding all of this that's come out to further muddy the waters. For instance, the made-up cell phone issue, the allegations that Ford committed perjury while citing her credentials, and the Safeway hoax. And that's just off the top of my head. And then there's the focus on the alcohol, his virginity, his yearbook, which I just Really, I'm gonna repeat this. Really, the fact that this is being approached the way that it has been approached is why this can no longer be considered just a job interview. It's a persecution. And justified or not, I think that we should, and we can be better than this. In closing, Miss Mitchell actually brought up an excellent line of questioning during her questioning of Ford that I think needs more attention.
Have you also educated yourself on the best way to get to memory and truth in terms of interviewing victims of trauma?
For me, interviewing victims of trauma?
No, the best way to do it, the best practices for interviewing victims of trauma.
No.
Okay. Would you believe me if I told you that there's no study that says that this setting in 5-minute increments is the best way to do that?
We'll stipulate to that.
We can stipulate. Thank you, counsel.
Agreed.
Did you know that the best way to do it is to have a trained interviewer talk to you one-on-one in a private setting and to let you do the talking, just let you do a narrative? Did you know that?
That makes a lot of sense.
Does make a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Yes.
And then to follow up, obviously to fill in the details and ask for clarification. Does that make sense as well?
Yes.
And the research is done by a lot of people in the child abuse field. Two of the more prominent ones in the sexual assault field are Giesel and Fisher, who've talked about it. And it's called a cognitive interview. This is not a cognitive interview. Did anybody ever advise you from Senator Feinstein's office or from Representative Eshu's office to go get a forensic interview?
No.
Now say what you will about confirming judges, that typically they call witnesses or have FBI investigations or what have you, but quite frankly, none of this should have ever happened the way that it did. And I think I made that very clear with this video. I'm not going to actually say who I believe, what I think should happen going forward, anything of that nature, because it really doesn't matter. Me stating my position on the issue isn't going to be the thing that changes or makes up your mind, people. It will be the facts of the case, the evidence presented, your own gut feelings or biases, and your own willingness and threshold for belief that makes up your mind for you, or changes it. I'm just a mode by which you can get your information, but don't let me tell you what's true and what's not. I've put all of the links in the description to everything that you could possibly want to look at, so by all means, go ahead. And Google's also a thing too, so you can also look into that for whatever it is that you're skeptical about. Now, if you like what I'm doing here, feel free to check out the links in the description to my Amazon, Patreon, and Teespring store. If you maybe don't like me that much, you can always like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. Also, don't forget to hit that bell so you actually get notified, because YouTube hates me and everyone. If maybe you want to see more of me in a different capacity, I do an RPG-esque stream show every Monday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Magaga Morscar's channel, and a bi-weekly stream about the news with segments for advice, call-ins, and fanfiction read-throughs, and more Sundays and Wednesdays from 7:30 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Some Dumb Americans channel. Links to their channels are down below.